Hello and welcome everyone again to our iCON-VCH Indigenous Health Round today. My name is Alex Fung. I am the Program Manager of the UBC Intercultural Online Health Network. I'd like to thank and acknowledge the Hunkaminam speaking language groups on whose stolen and traditional lands I'm calling in from today. We noticed we have a lot of, as our Dr. Kendall Ho, our unit lead, would say, we have a lot of old friends here today, and it's great to see a lot of new friends as well. I will be your moderator for the session today as Kendall is unavailable to join today. And I would, again, just want to share how grateful we are and how fortunate we are to have Jacki McPherson, a member of the Penticton Indian Band, and Brenda Baptiste, a member of the Osoyoos Indian Band, joining us today. Welcome, everybody. First start with the opening, have Elder Glida Morgan open our session in a good way, and then followed by the presentation from our guest speakers. Over to you, Elder Glida.
Emote, Osium. Welcome everybody. It's a beautiful day. I'm coming to you from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, and just raising my hands in gratitude to the host nations for allowing us to have our beautiful gathering here on their unceded occupied territory. And to begin, always wanting to invite you all to the sacred circle that we have here. And I'm Elder Glida Morgan from the Tla'amin Nation, my mother's people, always honoring her and my ancestors. My father is born in Church House. They were relocated to Campbell River on Vancouver Island. I'm a mother of two beautiful daughters, and I have one grandson and one great-grandson who's 11, and I'm delighted to be here for this presentation, and I feel so honored to be here with Jacki and Brenda. And to open us and bring us together, I always like to think of the beauty of the day and the gifts that we all bring. And I'm thinking of why we do this work. And it's for our children, our grandchildren, and those yet to come. And so this song I'm going to sing is for all of our beautiful children. Oh, 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 hey. Oh, 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 hey. Oh, 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 oh. Oh, 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 hey. Oh, 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 hey. We are the children of the world. We are the flowers in the sky. We are the hope of tomorrow. Hey. We are the children of the world. Oh, 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 oh. We are the children of the world. I invite you to pray in your own way, offering you a blessing as we begin. Creator, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, grandfathers, great-grandfathers, asking for blessings and to our circle here today as we begin, just giving thanks for each person here and for their families, asking for all blessings for our sacred animals, for the ones that fly in our sky, swim in our oceans, rivers, and lakes, for the ones that crawl upon our first holy Mother Earth, for the two-leggeds and the four-leggeds, asking for blessings for all the ones that are struggling. Lift them up, Creator, in a good way. Creator, I'm asking that we have a good experience today and receive and share thoughtfully. I'm asking this in a good and humble way. I'm asking for prayers of peace here and in our nations and around the world, Creator. OCM, Emo, Squayagan, thank you, thank you, thank you. Altnomich, thank you. Back to you, Alex.
Thank you so much, Elder Glida, for that lovely, meaningful presentation. I think my video has frozen, but I think I'll be back shortly. In the meantime, thank you everyone for sharing with us where you're calling me from today. And welcome everyone to do that in our webinar chat. I'd like to gonna give some opening remarks. I want to remind everyone that this session is being recorded. And I want to warmly welcome everyone to please use, during the presentation, to please use the Q&A feature to submit your questions for us to ask Brenda and Jacki in our talking circle later. And again, please try and use the Q and chat, the question and answer feature in the webinar instead of the chat for those questions, because we will be able to consolidate all those questions in the Q&A. And please use the chat for any comments that you would like to share. I'd like to thank our partners, our foundational partners, First Nations Health Authority, Vancouver Coastal Health, the BC Ministry of Health, Vancouver Physician Staff Association, and our Vancouver Physician Staff Association Engaging Physicians in Indigenous Cultural Safety Task Group for leading and for leading this work. And our task group members include Dr. Terry Aldred, Dr. Susan Burgess, Dr. Stefan Fink, Dr. Kendall Ho, Cooper Jackson, Dr. Janella Lee, Cherie Mercer, Elder Glyda Morgan, Dr. Jay Slater, Dr. Shannon Turvey, and our ICON support team, which include myself, Alex Fung, Pooja Ramachandran, and Paloma Gupta. We are so grateful for the foundational support of the BC Ministry of Health's Patients as Partners initiative, with whom we have developed a long-standing relationship over the past 10 years in advancing person and family-centered care. The Ministry of Health continues to advance the shared journey of reconciliation, applying equity and anti-racism approaches, and address systemic racism in the health system. This is recognized in the Ministry of Health's mandate letter that states that the ministry will continue working toward true and meaningful reconciliation by supporting opportunities for Indigenous peoples to be full partners in the inclusive and sustainable province we are building together. In this work, the Ministry of Health continues to address recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's calls to action, the UNDRIP, and the In Plain Sight report. For more information, please visit patientsaspartners.ca for free events and resources on person and family-centered care, chronic disease self-management, and caregiver support. We'd also like to acknowledge our partners at Vancouver Coastal Health Indigenous Health. VCH plays a critical role in upholding the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, DRIPA, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, 94 Calls to Action, the TRC, 94 Calls to Action, and in implementing the 24 recommendations of the In Plain Sight report. Together, we are committed to celebrating Indigenous ways of knowing and being, to acknowledging the strength and courage demonstrated while enduring generations of atrocities, and to embedding Indigenous cultural safety across the healthcare system. Lastly, we'd also like to acknowledge the support of the Vancouver Physician Staff Association as we work together to engage the physician community to build a more collaborative, inclusive, and caring communities to support best patient care, as well as the First Nations Health Authority for their integral guidance and support. Without further ado, I'm very again honored to have Jacki McPherson and Brenda Baptiste as our guest speakers today. In today's session, our speakers will discuss the ways to support Indigenous patients and to create cultural safety awareness about the historical impact that institutions, such as residential schools and hospitals, have had on Indigenous peoples. I would now like to open the stage and warmly welcome Brenda and Jacki to introduce yourselves.
Hello, my name is Jacki McPherson. I am in my territory. I'm the Silks territory, and we are in the Penticton Indian Band Health Center. I manage health for the band. I've been in Aboriginal health for about 30 years, probably more than 30 years. It's been a long, long time. I manage health for Penticton Indian Band now. I did manage health for the Osoyoos Indian Band for a lot of years also. I was a part of First Nations Health Authority before it started. I helped get it all going, and I was the president of the First Nations Health Directors Association for a number of years. And I did, I now teach the Health Directors course for First Nations Health Directors Association. I've also been the vice chair of the Canadian Mental Health Association of BC, and we've done great things there. We've brought a lot of things to our people, to the First Nations people in BC, which has been very new for them, and they're doing a fabulous job now. And I've facilitated with UBC 2324 initiative, which is a fabulous initiative. It really is. I really enjoy that. And Brenda can introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm Brenda Baptiste. I'm a member of the Osoyoos Indian Band, although originally I'm from the Penticton Indian Band, and I'm very honored and lucky to be working with my home community and my family and my relatives here. I'm the mental health substance use lead for the Penticton Indian Band, including managing our day treatment, our recovery house that we opened up on reserve over just a little over a year ago. That's doing amazing things. I've got a background in nursing, and I've worked off and on in health for probably about 30 years. I also work in economic development and tourism as well. And oddly enough, they are very connected because it's about creating wellness and healthy community members. I'm a mother and I'm a grandmother, and I love both of those roles, and it's so important. And Elder Gilda, thank you so much for the song and for the prayer. It's such a wonderful way to open up this discussion and to remind people of just the beauty of our culture and the healing nature of our songs, and the words that you used were absolutely incredible. We were talking earlier when we first started, and it turns out that Elder Gilda, I actually know her relatives from where she's from and her family, and she knows our relatives from here. We were just laughing. It's like such a small world where we all are. We're all connected, which is absolutely amazing. So thank you. Next. Oh, wait, no. The next slide.
Okay.
We'll get it right now.
So one of the things that we have been doing is doing these talks, cultural safety, getting to know our partners, which are our health authorities, our other organizations that do come and work with us. Those are so important. But having this conversation, it's not an easy conversation. It's not, and it's something that we have quite regularly. And I really do appreciate when we get to talk to the caregivers, the doctors, the nurses, the front end staff who deal directly with our people in this province. It's really important to us. It's important to what we do. There are a couple of things that we do talk about that are not easy. It's difficult. And I appreciate you being here and listening to us. And we like to create a safe space where you can ask us questions and we will answer them the best we can. We don't claim to know everything. But to start off, one of the things that we do and we acknowledge is the racism in this province is still here. It's still here. We deal with it every day. And you won't find any First Nations person in this province that hasn't run into it. And what we are trying to do is make it a little bit easier, a little bit better. And that's where we say, bringing up the past, talk about it, acknowledge it, and let's start from here. I do know, as a First Nations person who has run into racism my whole life, we have been called alcoholics. Often, usually, that's the first thing anybody says. Oh, they're brown, they're an alcoholic. It's just a part of what I grew up with. We have been called lazy. We have been called uneducated. And you know, for some reason, people seem to think we get free houses. We don't. I paid for over 20 years for my house. It's my house, but I paid for it. We don't get free houses. And you cannot, in this province, I believe you cannot find one person that has not been impacted by residential schools. We will talk about this, but everybody, every First Nations person in this country, in this province, has been impacted and affected by residential schools. It's a past, it's a history, we cannot change it. We are still dealing with it every day. Every day in my job, in Brenda's job, we are dealing with the effects of residential schools. We are strong, we are resilient, we're patient, and we are healing. We are healing at this point in time, and in this community, We are healing in numbers that we have never seen before. It's amazing, it's wonderful. Brenda's doing a fabulous job in what we're doing, and with the support of First Nations Health Authority and Interior Health, emergency services, various counseling organizations that we work with, we are healing. Really, really proud of what we are doing. My community is willing to go forward with the healing process. It's not easy. It's not easy, and we still run into drugs, alcohol, violence, all of these different things that impact sorry. Fully with this, the partnerships we have, the support of our leadership. They're encouraging us to have these conversations, open up the dialogue. And as I said, we are doing amazing things here. So, next one. Okay.
I just want to add that we do a lot of this work and all of these discussions and dialogue sessions with different groups, Interior Health, with resident doctors. I think this is the first time we've ever done one by Zoom, and it's an interesting experience, but we want to create a safe place. We always, you know, people are saying, well, I don't want to ask that question because it's stupid or it might sound racist, or we just want to make sure that there is no stupid questions and there is no racist questions, and it's just the whole goal here is to create that dialogue. You talked about, Alex, you mentioned reconciliation. For us, one of the most important parts of reconciliation is dialogue. It's us creating, letting you know our perception of our history and what we've gone through and how it impacts our communities, and you being able to not only hear that and better understand that, but also to ask the questions of us. So we really encourage you to put your questions forward. Thank you. Next one, Alex. So today we just did the welcome, thank you, our introductions. Just for the session, we are going to be talking about things that may be triggering. We're going to be talking about residential schools, government hospitals, COVID, and the impacts that it has on our communities. We're going to actually be talking about the history of the Penticton Indian Band people, because that's the people that we work closely with. And it was so wonderful to see on the chat where everybody is calling in from, or who's attending, because this is not our story that we're going to be telling today is not different from any other First Nations in BC. And so, and actually across Canada. So we just welcome you. We will share our own personal experiences from our families, from our mother, fathers, grandfathers, and how it's actually impacting our children and our grandchildren. We think that that's very important. And then looking at future relationships between Penticton Indian Band, whether it's Interior Health or your health authority, where you're at, how important those partnerships are, and how important it is to continue having this dialogue. Next one.
Residential schools. I know you've all heard about it. You've all, a couple of years ago, it was really, really huge on the news, and a lot of discussions were on it. And this one specifically is Kamloops Residential School. Me personally, I've had 4 parents go through residential schools. 4. 3 of them went to Cranbrook and 1 went to Kamloops. And it was only until recently more stories came out. After they found the babies in Kamloops, more stories came out. And I don't mind sharing this because I've talked to my parents about it. 3 out of the 4 were sexually assaulted. 4 out of 4 were physically assaulted. And the emotional scars that it carried, that they still hold, they still carry. Well, 2 of them are alive still, 2 of them are not. The scars are still there. And I am lucky. My parents, all 4 of them, went through some healing, actually a lot of healing. And it's been difficult. It's been difficult for them to talk about. Like I said, some of the stories I didn't hear about until 2 years ago. And we're dealing with it. I got my mom into counseling, which she would never ever do before. So that was really good. And my dad, he does talk a lot about it. He talks about medicine wheel. He talks about healing. But he's one who was kind of a rough guy. He was a bouncer in a nightclub for years. But when we would travel when I was young, he would look through the phone books. Every city we went to, he would look through the phone books, looking for his abuser's name. He looked for it for years. Every time we walked into a hotel, I knew that's what he was doing. And thankfully, before he got healed, he didn't find him. So it's still there though. It's still there. And as I said earlier, you will not find a First Nations person who was not impacted by residential schools and who still is. When we went to Kamloops a couple of years ago, after they found the babies, my mom and my aunt could not walk in. They were traumatized all over again. And thankfully, we've gotten, like I said, counseling since then. But it brought back so many memories and so much hurt. And so doing what we do now, it's really important to see that, to acknowledge it, to get our younger generation a little bit. It wasn't until then I realized myself. I didn't talk about it with my children. They had no idea a lot of this stuff. They heard about it on the news, then they started asking questions. So we've come a long way since then. And I did talk about my childhood, what my parents went a little more. But these discussions were new for them. And they were not happy with me, but they were new for them. And it is something that we're dealing with across the country. And one of the really important discussions that is healing here is healing. And this is a part of it. Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, it was really interesting when the discovery of the 215 happened. Not only the impact of our community, because it triggered so many people in our community, not only those residential school survivors, but a lot of the young people in our community who really didn't know the history were told. I'm like Jacki, I didn't talk to my children about it, but it created a lot of anger amongst the young people in the community because this had happened to their relatives. But the other interesting thing is that, we both have this vast network of people that we work with all across the province and all across Canada. And the messages that I was getting from people who were shocked, who were heartbroken, who really had to look at the history of Canada, because they knew about residential schools, but they assumed they were boarding schools, right? And so what's happening, or what had happened, is people were asking, what can we do? And my response was always, educate yourself. Look for the true history of Canada. It's not pretty, but it's important that we know and we continue to have that discussion, that dialogue. Are you guys hearing us okay?
Okay.
We're having a little bit of cutting out, but I think it's just for a few seconds. We catch most of it right now. Thank you.
Okay, next slide. So my mother actually went to the Cranbrook School at St. Eugene's, the Penticton Indian residential school. And my story is very much like Jacki's. I knew that she went and she had told me that she had gone, but she didn't talk about it at all. So I didn't hear the story until she was about 70 years old. And I just happened to be going there for a meeting. I asked her if she wanted to come. And she agreed. And on the way over, we were driving over, and that's an 8-hour drive. As we were driving, she started telling me the stories, and the stories of abuse, of losing friends, where they would just disappear, of, you know, all of the things, you know, starvation, all of those things that had happened to her. And you could tell she was just trying to get it out before we got to the school. And then when we got to St. Eugene's, and I love their staff there, because when I told them that she was a survivor, they actually had someone with her or watching her all the time to make sure that she was okay. And she went through and she looked at the pictures and she showed me, here, that's me. This is me working in the kitchen, this is me doing this. But there were certain areas of the school that she couldn't go to. Like a stairway where she was just terrified. She wouldn't go to, even though it's office space now, it was just so, they have a beautiful dining room there, but that used to be the chapel. And she couldn't even go across the threshold because she all of a sudden became a child again when she was there. And so these were the rules that were ingrained into her, and sometimes violently. And so she after that, she started talking more and more, and I was lucky enough to spend a lot of time with her where she recorded a lot of her experiences as a way of her healing, and she got counseling for it. But even with that, I did not talk to my son about it. And my son is 40 years old now. And when the 215 were discovered, when the babies were discovered, he was angry. But he was also very angry at me. He said, "Did you know? Did you know?" And I said, "Yes, I did." "Well, why didn't you tell me?" Because history repeats itself, and I need to know what happened to protect my son. And so that's how powerful this time was for our communities. And as a result, we had a lot of relapses in terms of alcohol, drug abuse, violence, domestic violence. So it wasn't just that this had come out into the public, it actually had an impact on our communities as well. And so we had to go and look at triage, treatment, what can we do, getting supports into the community. So it had a huge impact.
It definitely did, and it impacted our young people. Like we have said, in our communities, churches got burned down. That was difficult. It was difficult for our communities, but it really pointed out the need, and we were able to see our communities are impacted. Our young people are impacted. It wasn't our elders, it wasn't the former students that burned down the churches, it was our young people, the descendants of the people who went to residential schools. They were angry. They wanted it gone. And talking with them and teaching them, working with them and telling them we cannot erase history. We can learn from it and we can go on. And this is a part of learning from it. When we do these talks and we have these conversations, we don't want you to feel guilty. We don't want you to think you have to fix something. And as doctors, that's really hard to acknowledge. You can't fix it. It's over. But the impact is going on, and it will go on. It will go on for generations from now. My parents, they were terrible parents, but they were not taught how to be parents. because they were all in residential schools. A huge part of being a good parent is having a good parent. Having a good childhood makes it easier for you to give your children a good childhood. We had to learn all of this. And a part of Canadian Mental Health Association teaching was their parenting program. When I was vice chair of it, we talked about the parenting program, and they were saying, let's just put it into the reserves. Let's go and do this. And I was telling them, you need to step back and need to take a look at our parents do not know how to be parents. They were not taught. So let's go back and let's look at the history, and then let's go from there. And Brenda was a part of that transformation of the parenting program, which was really good, and it's very well received all over BC because this is still impacting my people all over the place.
Next slide. So the Coquilitza Indian Hospital, and this is where we start talking a little bit about the institutionalization. My mother went to residential school in Cranbrook, and then she was diagnosed with TB. So she started school when she was 5. She stayed there till she was 13, and then she was diagnosed with TB. And so they sent her to the Coquilitza Indian Hospital, where she stayed until she was 18. And so during that time, she was hospitalized. Their type of treatment were they did needles and injections, 5-6 times a day. They weren't allowed to be out of bed. They had to stay in bed. So she actually had to learn how to walk again when she was 18. She was, to the end of her life, she was terrified of needles, and she was a diabetic that required insulin. And so I think having this becomes really important when we're talking to health professionals with the Penticton Regional Hospital in terms of their emergency ward, is having people understand that people that have gone to residential school, that have gone to the Indian hospitals, there's a reason that they're not compliant. If you ask them, oh, okay, what's wrong with you? They'll always say, I'm fine, everything's fine. Even if they're not fine, they're frightened of doctors. They don't, they're not comfortable. And so part of this is having people understand that you're dealing with someone who has been institutionalized and hasn't had a safe experience. And so we have to change our language and our approach in terms of our health professionals when dealing with Indigenous people that have had these experiences, and understand that they're not being difficult, that they're not being disrespectful, they're not being non-compliant. This is part of how they were raised as well. And it becomes very important for people in the communities, frontline workers, to help support them. We spend a lot of time going with our elders to the hospital or to doctor's appointments and talk and listening to what the doctor's saying and facilitating that dialogue and that discussion. Because the other thing that happens is, because of the fear and the anxiety, they don't hear what the doctor says. So we always encourage the family, go with them, make them comfortable, but you need to listen to the instructions of the doctor.
Yes, next one. Next slide. There. And one of the reasons that we wanted to talk about this specifically is this card right here from the Coquilitza Hospital. It's from one of our elders that is still alive. So she's still here. We still provide service. It's not that far back. The history of the hospitals, the history of the residential schools, there are people who are still alive who went to both. So if you listen to the news, they talk about it like it was so long ago and we should get over it and be over it. It's not that long ago. It's my parents, it's our elders that we are dealing with every day. So it is still here. It's still something we have to deal with. It's still there.
And the treatment that they received at these Indian hospitals were not only treatment for TB, but this was also a place where experimental medications for influenza, for other illnesses were actually given to these children and these First Nations that were in these hospitals. And the reason that I know that is my mom, when she talked to me about it, one of the last things that she had met with her doctor about is he just told her, he said, you're never going to have children because of all of the other drugs that we've given you. So you will be sterile. And she was heartbroken. This was her dream, was to have children. And so it was something that was so heart-wrenching to her. Thank God they were wrong. Because she had 5 children and I'm one of them. But the other issue is that she, for the rest of her life, she had serious medical issues. She never drank. She had serious liver disease. She had pancreatitis. She had long-standing illnesses. And as the result of the medications, and when she was working with her doctors, they couldn't identify what caused all of these medical issues. And they just assumed that it was part of the medication that she was given while she was in Cobaliza. So that causes a lot, and we find this even now with some of our elders, if they're given blister packs of medication, it's terrifying for them. They don't know what that is, right? And they will refuse to take their medications until we sit down and show them and explain to what this medication is for.
Yes. Next slide. COVID impacts. This is something that is really recent. We're still dealing with, we still have COVID out here. We still have all kinds of flus and all kinds of things that are happening now. One of the things that we had to deal with COVID, it was horrible. It took us back years to where you had to have a shot, you had to have a mask, you had, there were so many rules. And our people, as you can see, do not trust the healthcare system because of our history. So working with our people, especially our elders, on the rules and requirements of going anywhere and doing anything. You had to be vaccinated, you had to have a mask. In a grocery store, you had to walk a certain way. It brought back so much residential school stuff. That was terrifying for them. But one of the bigger impacts it had on our people was, in life, there are 2 things that are for certain and very, very important to our people. That is birth and that is death. Somebody is born into our families, especially the leaders of the families are there when the baby is born to welcome them into the family, the nation, the territory. When somebody dies, when it's time for them to go on, it's really important for the family to be there. For one, to start the grieving process, but also to let the person go, knowing that it's okay, we'll be okay, we'll look after each other, so they can go in a peaceful way. We want people welcomed and we want people to go peacefully. COVID stopped that. COVID did not allow people to be there at birth and death. And we had a lot of angry people, so angry when they could not be there, especially when their elder died. When we had five elders die during COVID, their families are still mad at me. And I didn't even work here, but I worked with the hospital. So having that still impact how I work with the family, what I can do for the family, it's still there. But again, that's something you can't fix. You can't change it. We're working from there and we're healing from there.
I think there was a question that came up about how to create safe spaces. And sorry, I was chuckling about the questions about voices and background noise. We're actually in our little boardroom and we have a fish tank of salmon, little salmon fry that we raise until we have our salmon ceremony in June and release them off. And so they're loud. That's probably what you're hearing in the background. But in terms of creating safe spaces, and we can't change what happened during COVID. And that kind of grieving process was interrupted for many of our community members. But what we can do is make sure that the hospitals, our healthcare professionals, that people understand why they are so resistant. I mean, we had a family member who lost his wife during a time where he couldn't be there with her, and he's still grieving. And so we have to go through that grieving process with him. But we've also had situations where if you ever wonder why 30 people are waiting for a baby to be born, we've just explained why. So we work with the hospital to say, yes, you are going to have a lot of people here, and also people that are going on to the next leg of their journey, that there is going to be 30 people there, and they may need to smudge, they may need to do ceremony, and those are important pieces of our, letting go and of our grieving process and that celebration of life. So we work with the Penticton Regional Hospital and the interior health facilities. We've just worked with them on a smudging protocol and how do we actually do that within their facilities as well. Those are the things that are incredibly important.
Very important. The one that I did want to briefly go over some of the things that we work on now, because what we're doing now, it's not done anywhere else. We are breaking ground on this. It's just so exciting, and it makes me really proud of what we're doing and what we're able to do with interior health. I know everywhere you are in somebody's territory, and you guys were lovely enough to say where you are from, whose territory you are in. I strongly suggest you talk to them, work with them. I think that's amazing, and I love seeing that. But some of the things that we're doing, because we went over a bit of our history and what we work with, who we work for. We have created a mental health substance use team. And one of the things, I've only been here 3 years. I'm from here, but I've only been here 3 years. But what we have created, because we've seen the impacts of residential schools, of COVID, of all of these things on our people, we created a team. And Brenda can talk about her team, because it's her team.
I've got an amazing team of 8 now. We just hired 2 more. And so we do community outreach. So I've got 4 people that do community outreach. We actually have a program called the Integrated Community Outreach Program, which works with RCMP, Emergency Services, Interior Health, and my team that go out into the community every Tuesday, hand out harm reduction supplies. They go to all of the houses, drug dealers, people that are actively using. This is not about enforcement. This is about letting them know that here's the resources that are available. We do pop-up naloxone training throughout the community. And we do outreach all the time, and we work directly with those people that are struggling with addictions, mental health. We also do referrals to counseling, and we, at the moment, we've got 260 files open within this community out of a community of 1,100, which is absolutely amazing. We've opened a recovery house, which is really about it. We started out as a day treatment, but we realized that it was so much bigger than that, that this had to be a place where the entire community could come, could learn about addiction, about trauma, about self-care, about life skills, and also do day treatment curriculum as well. And so we've been incredibly lucky to have the support of my two team members that manage that program. And now we do an urban outreach because we have a lot of unhoused people in our community. So my two urban outreach people will actually be going into the city of Penticton, tracking people down, making sure that they're okay, making sure that they have referrals to the resources from Interior Health, or coming back to the community to take part in all of any of our programs here. We work very closely with the rest of the health team, and we also do community-based programming. So we work with youth, we work with kids, young ones, we work with elders, we work with adults, we work with families. And we take a wraparound approach around mental health and substance use. We don't separate the two. Our entire team is cross-trained to do treatment applications, detox applications, referrals, all of those things, so that one person can go to one worker and never have to repeat their story and be tied into all of the services and resources. It's been amazing, the impact that it's had in the community, and we are willing to share with other communities because it's been so successful. And I'm just so grateful to have been honored to have a part in this.
The one thing that is in that program, as well as all of our other programs, our Head Start, infant toddler, all of those other programs, is on the land. We make sure we incorporate our territory into our programs. My grandmother, a long time ago, she told me, know where you're from. Know where you're from and know where you belong, so you don't go looking somewhere else like drugs and alcohol. And that is something that I do really keep with me. But we make sure our people, our clients, our parents, and our kids all know our territory. They go out and they dig roots, they pick berries, we go hunting, we do a lot of things to bring back some of the tradition and culture that a lot of people have lost. And it's been really fun, really amazing. Our community has loved it. They're really doing well, and that wraparound approach is really, really important. When we have a client, we do make sure we include the whole family. And the one thing that is also really important is our partnerships. Interior Health has been amazing. When we started this program, and when we start any programs, actually, they come to my health center. Having conversations with them and telling them my people will be more receptive, will be more open, and be willing to work with you if you come to my office. So we do have, what is that program? OAT program. The OAT program, it comes here, and they work with our addicts, which has been really good. They text them too, which is awesome. Today I have a pediatrician down the hall coming to see our babies. We have a lot of services that come out here, and that's really important. And one of our exciting things for this year is we're setting up a sensory room for our autistic children and our parents who need a little bit of help and guidance in working and helping their kids. So we're really trying to change things to work with what our community needs. And we are been so blessed. We have many partners who are willing to work with us the way we need them to work with us. It's been an amazing journey in the past 3 years, and I do strongly recommend wherever you are in BC, contact the band office, contact the health center, contact the health director. I know for a fact we have about 200 health directors in BC. I've worked with a lot of them, so I know they're there. I know what they do. I know how hard they work, and I know how they would really appreciate help and how they would appreciate partnerships and how they would appreciate all of you going to them and working with them.
Good, well, thank you. I think the other important part about that is just being creative in the work that you're doing. One of my favorite stories is when I first started here, and I've been here for 3 years as well, is that one of my team decided that he wanted to take a bunch of boys to the rec center, to the weight room. And my response was, I'm not gonna pay you to go work out. But we agreed, and and it turns out he's got 17 young men between the ages of 13 and 18. They are all sober, except 2 that use intermittently. They've learned about nutrition. They work out 3 times a week, and they also participate in our programming around anxiety, around mental health, and they're also now getting employment ready. So they want to go out and work. It's been such a successful model, and part of our success is the fact that we are willing to look at alternate ways of doing things in the community that you would never really think would be part of mental health substance use. Turns out it was the best program that we're offering. And we're doing other programs that you wouldn't think would normally be part of a healthcare system. But it's through those activities that we are actually making headway with the community and meeting them where they're at, because that's the most important thing. Any questions or comments?
Wow. Fantastic. Brenda and Jacki, I really want to thank you very much first. I apologize I couldn't make it to the beginning of this session. I'm so glad I made it. And by the way, I'm Kendall Ho. I live in Vancouver, the traditional unceded territories of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. But today I'm actually in Europe, and so I don't have a land acknowledgement here, and that's also part of the reason why I've missed the beginning. Wow, Brenda and Jacki, there are a lot of questions. I'm going to get to them right away, but just want to thank you very much for creating a safe space. I want to thank you for sharing the story so authentically and helping us to understand that when we have community members who may be reluctant to take medications, would be very hesitant to get to be given needles, to really not want to share some of the experiences. The fact that there's a lot underneath, and you help us to start knowing about this. And so thank you so much for doing that and your good work. So really appreciate that. I'm going to ask one question from the Q&A section first, because that was actually the first one that came in. And then the other Q&A start coming in. And this one is about what can, this is a colleague of ours who's in emergency, Alexi. How can we create a safer space for First Nations people in a healthcare setting? I often face this challenge as an emergency nurse, where I'm so limited for time and often will only meet First Nations patients and their families one time. Are there specific things that you feel that we can do or make them feel better? Great. Fantastic. Thank you, folks. Brenda and Jacki, let me come right back to you. How can we, what are your suggestions, advice to us. Welcome your thoughts.
I would say, first of all, I know it's really busy in an emergency room, and that was where we started our educating doctors and nurses, was in the emergency room, because usually that's the first place our people go. So creating a safe space for our people and the emergency room was really important, and letting them know this is a history. This is why it's not working. Make sure you take the time to sit and speak with them one-on-one. Try and get them as much support there as you can. Make sure you, like with my grandmother, she had heart disease, she had diabetes, she had glaucoma, she had all kinds of things. She had cancer. But we would bring her to the hospital and she'd say, I'm fine, with a beautiful smile on her face. And when I was with her, and the doctor was great and always wanted to ask her the question, but that's what she'd answer like. So when I was there, I would say, no, Grandma, you're not. This is what's happening. So making sure that the information is getting there is really important. So sometimes having that support person around them and allowing them to speak and bring that message across is really important. And like I said, with my grandma, she was always fine. Day before she died, she was fine, but she wasn't. So I was able to bring that message across. And after our post visit, make sure somebody else gets the treatment plan, the follow-up, the prescriptions, whatever. A lot of times, especially our elders, will not remember. Will forget to go get their medication, will forget to take it, all of those things. So make sure somebody has that message too. Those are two things that are really important, but before and after.
I think the other thing that's really important is that we actually work very closely with the Director of Emergency Services, had conversations. We had all of the directors from Interior Health come out into the community. We ate together and we talked about, we had community members and elders there who said, this is why I don't like emergency. This is what happens. I feel like the questions you're asking are racist. And so they actually got to hear from our community members and those, the people from Interior Health, actually explained why they had to ask these questions. And then we sat down with the frontline nurses in emergency as part of that. It's like, how can we better ask those intrusive questions in a way that's creating a safe space for your Indigenous patient? Like, instead of saying, do you drink? And because our people assume that you're just assuming they're an alcoholic, and then their barriers go up. Asking the question differently or explaining these are standard questions that we have to ask. And and here's why. Alcohol is an important component because we may have to give you medication. So that's why we have to ask about the alcohol and the drugs. Once they started explaining to the patient during triage, people started to actually say, okay, I understand why you're asking. You're not asking just because I'm an Indian, right? There's medical reasons. So creating that safe environment. The other thing is that Jacki and Penticton Indian Band have worked with the emergency rooms. There's two really important things. One, we have an Aboriginal patient navigator who works with all of First Nations patients that come in the door. The second is that visually, they actually have their triage and they've got visual, they've got our language where it says reception, registration. It actually has that in our Okanagan language. So visually, there are cues that they have respect for our Indigenous culture and identity. And that's really critical. We're visual people. So having those imagery and having that language is really important.
So part of what we did
please.
when We had our people ask the questions and stuff like that. We also created space for them to come and explain what triage was, which was really important because our people thought they went to emergency and just got ignored because they were Indian. So they got to explain that. And it was really important for them also to see people that they might see up there. So they got names, they got a little bit of a relationship. So they could go and ask for Nancy or Mary if they were around, because that's who they connected with in the meetings we had in our community. That was important. Those doctors and nurses came to my community hall. That's where the meetings happened.
Love it. I love the 6 tips and the 3 phases. One is to go upstream and come to your community center, listen to community members, what are their concerns about emergency, and also do a bit of sense making in terms of the processes that we go that we do in emergency. And also seek your thoughts about how do we ask those questions that may sound intrusive, but how do we word it? And then at the emergency to have visual signals that in your language, and also having a navigator. And then finally, when we are one-on-one with the patients, that we listen intently, and hopefully we'll have family member who can also work together. And then finally, making sure that we give instructions more than just to the patient, but also to the patient's caregiver or friend or family together. I think those are fantastic tips. Thank you so much. Next question is in the Q&A now. Caddy, I hope I pronounced your name right. Caddy is asking, what are the ages of people who would have been in residential schools now? Granted, others are affected. Just wondering about the most likely ages people who would have been in the schools themselves.
You have to remember that the Kamloops Residential School was open in 1970. So this is not a long time ago. My mother was, well, how old is your mom?
70, no, 80. She's 80.
Yeah. Her dad is 70. My ex-husband actually went to residential school in Cranbrook, and he's 70 as well. So it varies, but I think the message is that when we talk about residential schools, people think that this was a long time ago, like generations ago, and it really wasn't. It's one generation, not even that, away from. I mean, I was born in 61. That residential school still operated in 1970.
The one in Williams Lake closed in 1997. So it's not that long ago.
No.
There are people my age that younger than me that went to residential school.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that. Certainly make us much aware, and especially not thinking that it's in the past. It's still happening, at this generation. Next question from Kyle. How have these stories, experiences result being written up somewhere so that others can learn from your knowledge? And how are your services financed? Is it easy or difficult to be financed, to be supported? Obviously, you're doing very valuable activities. So do you share it in writing? And secondly, what are ways to help you sustain your type of services?
Each area is different. For my nation, the Okanagan Nation, we do have a book. There's a book written by residential school survivors. It has amazing stories in it. A lot of the history is in it. It's orange. I can't remember the name of it. So sorry. I can send it to Alex later. And
How are you financed?
First Nations Health Authority. What we did when we first started this program, it's a pilot project because it's nowhere else in the country. What we're doing here is new, not been done before. They were nice enough to finance us to start. It's not enough. We have done proposals. Brenda's master proposal writer. We get a lot of different pots of money from a lot of different places to be able to do this. But it started with First Nations Health Authority. They gave us a chunk, it's not enough. So if you guys have any money around that you want to give us, we're more than glad to take it.
Let me know, I'll write you a proposal.
There you go. Thank you very much. Really valuable work you're doing. Absolutely. And by the way, I've been seeing all the thank yous to you and your stories. Just absolutely amazing. Our next question is from an anonymous attendee. What are some common barriers community members, your community members face in accessing healing service? And I'm going to tag on one other question that I have a question on. You know, you mentioned, you know, that you would actually have your mom see a counselor. What are the types? How can we ready ourselves so that we can be trustworthy partner of you when you refer community members to us? I welcome your thoughts. What are some of the barriers, and how can we become trustworthy with you to support your community members?
Education, listening. That's a huge part of moving forward. One of the biggest barriers is lack of trust, not feeling like you're heard, you're feeling all alone, that nobody understands, nobody knows what you're going through. You'll never be fixed. It'll never go away, that last ditch feeling of despondency. That's what a lot of our people feel. So working with them, we can work with them to work on those types of things, getting them the individual counseling, constant encouragement, sometimes holding their hand and walking with them to appointments, sitting with them in appointments. We do whatever we can and whatever we have to get them to a point where they can heal and start working on their healing. It's not easy. It takes a lot. Brenda's staff is super busy. There's not enough of them.
I think there's some other barriers too. One is very often when we're doing things like housing applications through VC housing, VAT assessments, or even accessing services through interior health. A lot of times the assessment piece, those forms are Western based.
Yeah.
And so it's really challenging for our community members and we have to work with them, right? And we go through it with them, and we support them very often just by reading the questions, explaining the questions, and you know, because those questions can be very triggering. Like we were doing a VAT assessment, and you know, the question was, have you ever been sexually abused? I'm not sure why that's part of an assessment, but it completely triggered the person that we were working with. And we thought, okay, we need to start changing some of the modern Western medicine, even the intakes from emergency. If we can start changing some of the language, because I'm sure it's triggering for non-Indigenous people as well, but using that more people focused as opposed to clinical focused and trauma-informed languages, right? We're working with the emergency hospital because we had a sexual assault in the community. We brought the client in to emergency. One of the books that they gave them was a book, because we live in multi-generational houses. The book on the very cover, it said, so you've been sexually assaulted. Here's what you can do, right? And it completely triggered that individual who's very vulnerable. So it's changing those small things as well, part of the barriers, but other barriers, transportation, poverty, lack of food insecurity, right? Especially if you're dealing with medications and things like that. Those are really challenging. Plus there's barriers on, if you're living on reserve, there's certain services that it's very difficult. We're lucky because we've got a strong partnership with Interior Health, but some of the communities are not able to access services on reserve from the regional health authorities. And so those things have to change as well. In terms of creating trustworthy relationships, I agree. I think a lot of that actually is just around dialogue, being able to have that conversation with Interior Health and other organizations, say, here's where our community's at, here's what we're facing, here's what we need, how can we work together? Because it's a win-win for both of us.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And again, a couple of comments I probably won't get to. Lydia just wrote a really wonderful comment in the chat, and Candy also. But you made me think, very often in emergency, sometimes we do rely on forms, and then we use forms to gather information. But so easy for me to be unaware that is actually triggering. So thank you so much for that. Next question from John. Moving forward, do you have any thoughts about social determinants of health in preventive care? I think you just spoke to that a little bit. Maybe you can go a little bit deeper there. How can we effectively cope with the greed of the estimated 10,000 global billionaires? I hear you. Yes. Yeah, how do social determinants of health? You mentioned several of them now, poverty, food safety, etc. Any additional thoughts on that particular comment?
What we've realized in our work with mental health substance use is when we originally started this program, we thought we'd be doing referrals for counseling, getting people to treatment detox. We realized very quickly that first we had to make sure that they were housed, that they were safe, that they had food, that they had goals, like basic needs, before we could actually start working on what they needed, whether it was treatment or psychological support or counseling. And so, but the amazing part of that is when you start working on those determinants of health, that's where the relationship starts. And as you're building that and creating that trust, you're actually creating a pathway to health so that they can become sober, so that they can get the emotional support that they require.
And it is a direction from First Nations Health Authority. They are working on the social determinants of health. And one of the things that we do from a young age in this community is we talk about education, we talk about planning for the future, we talk about making sure you have the education or the training, the housing, the support that you need to go farther, to get to your dreams, to get to your goals. So we start working on those at a very young age now. So that's a huge part of what we do.
Excellent. Thank you. I may have to accelerate a little bit. We have 9 minutes left, and we have a few questions, but we'll go for another at least 3 or 4 questions if possible. Are there any social or cultural or political trends you see in the current events that are working against meaningful reconciliation or working for?
I think one of the things that I think we're very lucky in this province. I think that this government, who has put UNDRIP and DRIPA as an important part of the work they do, and that reconciliation is part of their mandate letters for every single ministry. I think that's incredibly important. I think that being able to have these dialogue sessions and holistically about what is reconciliation by react the way that they do, I think that's incredibly important. In terms of challenges to that, I think some of the challenges that we have is that people make the assumption that if they do a session like this, like one session for their organization or their their regional health authority, then they can check off a box. Okay, we've done reconciliation, right? Not realizing that this is a long-term ongoing process. And it's a painful process because when you start having these dialogues, you heard some very traumatic things and personal stories. Those are triggering, those are traumatic. But you need to go through that and you need to be able to think about that and think about that pain before you actually get to the healing part of it. Healing does not come from good times. Healing comes from those painful experiences that you have. So having people embrace the fact that this is a long-term process is important, and it's work that has to continue.
It really is, and a part of what's happening right now is the instability and the unknowing of the political state, not only in this country, but in the States. Because that border is not from us. I have family in the States. We have family in Washington. We have a lot of family down there. So the instability that these countries are going through right now is scary for us.
I hear you. Thank you. What are some of the important culturally safe components of introducing oneself, a health professional, to an Indigenous clients if when we see them? What do you think would be culturally safe components we can do to introduce ourselves?
Introduce yourself, your name, what you do, and you want to help. You want to help. And that's one thing I love about these meetings where you say whose territory you're in, acknowledging that territory and respecting that territory, respecting whose territory you're in. That is two different things. So it's really important to do that. Remember where you are and respect that. Respect those people and acknowledging where you are and who you're working with.
Excellent. Thank you. And Jacki, anything you want to add?
What? Anything you want to add?
Okay.
Oh, no.
Yeah, no worries. Fantastic. I think so. Yeah, you both are great answers for sure. Thank you so much. Regarding the partnership, next question. Regarding partnership accords agreement between the First Nations Health Authority and other health authorities, would it make sense for decisions and strategic priorities of these meetings and discussion to be disseminated to the health authority frontline staff? I'd perhaps, love to hear your thoughts, and also, are you aware of health authorities kind of sharing these, and how do we make sure that the discussions get shared with the frontline staff, perhaps?
Most definitely. It is really important. Being with the First Nations Health Authority when we started, I was at the level with the provincial government, the federal government, and the health authorities when these agreements took place. And having it go down, by the time it reaches the people, they have no idea what was decided on the top. But having people know what is in the agreements is really important. I have gotten things for my community by using these agreements, where I could take pieces out and say, this is what you and your government has agreed to. This is what I need. And that is why it's important. I've been a part of different agreements between, like I said, on the provincial level, but with Interior Health, same thing, having those agreements. The one thing that I do love about First Nations Health Authority is we have a voice. We did not have that voice before. We were not at the table when you were talking about First Nations health, when you were talking about looking after my people. We were not there. And now we are. And now we have a voice. And now we can talk and we can ask questions and we can have questions. This is new for this. I love seeing it. I love being a part of it, because we are moving, we are changing, and we are working together more, which is really necessary.
Excellent. Really appreciate it. I think, unfortunately, time's up, but we have answered most of the questions, which is amazing. Wow, Brenda and Jackie, thank you so much for your openness and your authenticity and also your positivity. The fact that, hey, these things happened already. It's about looking forward. How do we work together? How do we heal, support the healing, and how do we be trusted partners to support our community members? So really appreciate this very, very positive thought. Alex, I was going to pass it back to you, but Elder Glider, maybe I also invite you. Do you have any comments before we close? Welcome your thoughts there.
Thank you, Dr. Kendall Ho, and looking forward to hearing about Vienna upon your return. I just want to raise my hands and in gratitude and appreciation for sharing all of what you shared, Jackie and Brenda. It's so needed in our hospital settings and such. Education such as this is so important, and I do believe that we have so much to learn and so much more education on the topics that were shared today. And I just think what you said is all so vitally important. And one thing I am so proud and happy to be a part of this circle, to have you to share that knowledge. And another topic too that I'm interested in is retaining our Indigenous staff, and having more of our people working in positions of being able to make decisions and such for our people. And so I just want to say, working towards just helping all of our people and towards living in a good way, in a healthy and healing. So I just want to say thank you, and it's my great honor to be a part of the circle, and maybe one day we can meet. So thank you in person, that is, and thank you so much, and thank you to everyone in our circle. Emote, Skoigan, thank you. Back to you,
Thank you very much. Alex?
Alex.
Thank you, Elder Glida, and thank you, Kendall. I just want to add my thanks to Jackie and Brenda for your insightful responses to our wonderful questions from the audience, for your presentation, for sharing the stories from your communities, for sharing the personal stories from your family, and for creating such a safe space for our participants today. Thank you so much again, Jackie, Brenda, Elder Glida, and
Oh, see
Kendall.
you.
This brings us to the
Yeah.
conclusion.
Oh, see you.
Brings us to the conclusion of our session. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. We'd love for you to take a few moments just to provide some feedback to our survey, which is in the chat, and it should also open up in your browser after you end this webinar. And once again, thank you all. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you to our partners, to FNHA, Vancouver Coastal Health, BC Ministry of Health, Vancouver Physician Staff Association, and our VPSA Engaging Physicians in Indigenous Cultural Safety Task Group for leading this work.
Oh, see you.
Thank you again, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.